There you go, Bob Dylan, I'll Be Your Baby Tonight. It's the Steve Satan Show, and my guest is an arch-devil worshipper, Mr. Tony Gosling. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Mr. Satan.
There's been a lot in the news lately, hasn't there?
Well, there certainly has, yes. There normally is, actually.
And the reason we're going to talk about... what are we going to talk about? Oh, yes, Diana's back in the news. Why is Diana back in the news?
Well, Princess Diana is not going to be out of the news until the case is solved. Certainly the case, even though we've had a royal inquest, which by rights is completely wrong, the royal coroner should never have investigated the royal crime. It should have been somebody from, outside the immediate royal circle to do the inquest. Once it's solved, then I think this will go away as a story, but it hasn't been solved. I mean, a lot of people talk about her death. I talk about her assassination because I think it was a political killing.
Right.
And it has been coming back into the spotlight again because of this case of Danny Nightingale from the SAS. Now, if anyone was going to know about what really happened to Diana, I suppose the SAS would be the obvious people to ask.
Well, that's assuming that the SAS were guilty of assassinating her.
Not necessarily, no, but they're in the know. Yeah, so even if it was operatives from another organisation, whether they be mercenaries or the French Secret Service, the SAS are likely to be at least informally in the loop somewhere.
Maybe
because they chat to each other.
Yeah, okay. So what has Danny Nightingale said? What's emerged about Danny Nightingale?
Well, Danny Nightingale hasn't actually said anything, but I think this is a good example of what happens when you take on the SAS in court, because if people don't remember, he's the guy who was found to have ammunition and I believe it was a pistol at his home address, which he certainly should not have had. And he was saying, it was a sort of memento. Hang on a minute. There are laws to do with firearms, and everyone can understand that. Hang on a minute. Just because you're in the SAS doesn't mean to say you can have an unofficial, unlicensed firearm.
You're supporting the official position there, but there was a lot of public sympathy towards him, wasn't there?
Well, there is, and also, of course, he is someone who's thinking, well, look, if you're going to take me on and have a go at me about this, well, I've got a few things to say about you. And that's what's happened. As part of his court case, one of the bits of evidence that's emerged was a letter sent not by him, but by another colleague, which includes allegations about the death of Diana. Now, two specific allegations which have been talked about. One is that there was a massive cover-up involved in it, and also that this other person who hasn't been named in this letter, was named in the letter but not been named publicly, knew who had actually organised the assassination of Diana.
Right.
So it seems to me what's going on here, just to give a sort of broad background of it all, is that this guy is rather annoyed about Danny. He's rather annoyed about being prosecuted. He doesn't feel he's done anything wrong. And in order to, I suppose, have a go back at the establishment that he feels has cheated him, he's saying, well, OK, if you can have a go at me, I can have a go at you too. And so that is why that this letter has been released. In court, in public.
Yeah, okay.
So hopefully some investigative journalist or somebody involved with that case will get down and reveal who some of these names are. I want to know who is being accused, because I know who I think was behind the death of Diana.
Right. So why have... You see, what I struggle with is if your conspiracy theory is correct, then generally speaking, the establishment would close ranks and, sweep stuff under the carpet. So why have the police gone public and said... We're making a new investigation?
Well, they have a difficult job, don't they? If a new bit of evidence about Diana's assassination is released in a court case and the police do nothing about it, all of a sudden it's the spotlight is on them.
And
here's new evidence. Why are the police not investigating it? And by the way, they've also said that they're not reopening the investigation into her death.
So
they've said that they've done a kind of halfway house.
Right.
What the Scotland Yard have said is that we are having another look. They're not starting another investigation, a proper investigation. They're having a look to see whether this is credible evidence.
So well, that's the whole point, isn't it? I mean, there's surely serious doubts about the credibility. Okay, an ex-SAS man with an axe to grind presents a letter from another bloke who used to work with him, who might also have an axe to grind. It could be just nonsense, couldn't it?
It could be tittle-tattle.
Yeah.
But certainly from the evidence that I've gained over the years, it certainly is not tittle-tattle. Right. There's been a massive cover-up, I think, over the death of Diana. There are all sorts of other reasons why this is interesting that it's happening now. One of which is the fact that just this weekend there were pictures in the newspapers of Prince Harry going to Angola and doing exactly what his mum did, which is drawing attention to the horrendous legacy of landmines.
So why is that significant?
Well, it's significant because many people believe that's why Diana was killed, because she was campaigning against landmines. The landmines industry is a very powerful industry, both in Britain and in France. They provide a massive amount of exports for those two countries, and so I don't think there's much doubt about the fact that those two industries in those two countries were very annoyed. And of course, there had to be some sort of link between France and Britain for the death to happen in Paris. If it was dodgy.
Yeah, we see. I mean, I don't buy it. I tell you, I'm going to play another tune, and then we'll talk about the whole conspiracy theory and the supposed assassination of Diana. But, this is The Jam and the Eton Rifles. Eton Rifles from The Jam. So it's Steve Satan here on the radio, along with Tony Gosling. Tony Gosling, your show on Friday. I'm no doubt you're going to be talking about this.
I imagine that's the sort of song you'll hear around the Cameron household, of course.
Yeah.
If you ever get invited down to the Cameron Manors, allegedly the Eton Rifles is the kind of song you're going to hear, which is amazing, really, since it's all taking the mickey out of the Eton boys.
Yes, in the very unlikely event that either you or I get invited to David Cameron's house. I mean, I think I'd want to kick him very hard in the testicles. Oh. Anyway, let's move on. So, I mean, we're talking about Diana and the Diana conspiracy, and the what you claim is an assassination. So, let's accept that there are, the landmine, as you say, landmines are big business. There's a pressure on, they're not...
the motive. Okay, we're on the motives.
Yeah.
All right, the other motive, very important motive, is, apart from the landmines, is the massive embarrassment she was beginning to cause to the royal family. I mean, the royal family is essentially like a kind of cult. They are very, very close. Extremely secretive, have been for centuries, probably since around about the time of Edward III, which is the 1300s. It's been very, very close, apart from the Civil War, where we had a king, Charles I, who started to think for himself, and it's all been very, very close to the royal family. So the fact that you'd had somebody who was right in the middle of all of that, who was actually rather glamorous, and had then come out of it completely. I mean, we for example, we played a clip of Diana herself speaking, because when she wrote... when Andrew Morton wrote the book Diana, Her True Story, the entire thing was a complete and utter bombshell for the royal family.
Right.
She was telling the story to Andrew Morton. They didn't like it at all, and this was like a hammer blow to the royals, rather like the Panorama programme, if you remember that. Diana did almost 45-minute long interview. This was showing up the royal family really to be actually rather a nasty bunch, and the fact that Charles had been the one that had actually cheated on Diana didn't seem to matter. The fact was that Diana was treated by the royal family as the enemy rather than the victim of Charles and his indiscretions with other women.
Yeah.
So
but I'm still
she was constantly banging away about the royal family and what they were really like. Yeah. They didn't like that at all. Someone who'd been in the inner circle was squealing.
Yeah, I get that. But, okay, so firstly, in the case of the landmines then, right, the political pressures from the landmines, surely, rather than assassinating her, someone would have, in the first instance, had a quiet word and say, look, back off here, and secondly...
Yeah, but she was never going to do that, right? This is what a lot of people have said. In fact, talking to Tracy Worcester, the Marchioness of Worcester from Badminton, I mean, these people live big next-door neighbours of Charles. I talked to her about Diana, and she said, oh, Diana, what a stupid woman. Thing is, she wouldn't do what she was told. She was an independent-minded, independent spirit, and that was one of the reasons that they realised, look, this actually warning her is not going to work.
Right, well, you may be right, but also the other thing about the whole idea of her embarrassing the royal family, she was nonetheless, still very popular in herself, and I would have thought she was still more of an asset to the royal family than
she was outside the royal control, right? Well, outside the royal circle, and also she was shooting in.
She was that much of a liability that they were going to have her killed. You reckon?
Yeah, that's part of the reason. Yeah. I think the main reason was the business of the landmines, because she was starting to affect profits of these big companies in France and in Britain, and that's why one of the best books on all of this, without a shadow of a doubt, is John Morgan. He's an Australian Republican, funnily enough, retired journalist who decided to go into the three main interesting reports. One is the British, the Paget inquiry, the Stevens inquiry, which was the police report from Britain. They had a French police inquiry as well into the assassination or the death, and then they had the inquest. So all those three were areas where lots of evidence came in on all sides. What John Morgan did is he's gone through the whole thing to try and build up a pattern of what really happened. Yeah. And that book I would thoroughly recommend. It's only about 130, 140 pages. You can read it in a day.
Okay.
And it's called Princess Diana, the Paris-London Connection.
Right.
And I think unless you understand that there was a dual interest for the British government and the French government to see the end of Diana, then you don't understand why it happened in Paris.
Well, okay. Now, the other thing I want to come to is the other reason why I'm sceptical of this assassination theory is the practicality of killing her in a car accident. Now, let's not forget that one of the guys actually survived, and it's entirely possible, having planned this supposed assassination, that Diana could have survived.
She did survive. She did survive.
Well,
and John Morgan makes it absolutely clear from the evidence of the very first medic that got to her that she was scoring 14 out of 15 on the scale that they use. I don't know, can't remember what it's called.
Right.
But paramedics have a scale when they come to an accident scene and there are several casualties to quickly assess who is the most in need of treatment. Diana was hardly in any need of treatment. She was talking, she was breathing fine, she was in the back of the car. So what John is saying in his book is that he believes that the evidence points to her actually being killed in the ambulance as she was taken from the scene to the hospital, because the ambulance took a very long time. It stopped somewhere in between.
Right. And
so she was actually quite healthy. It's just that the people who were in the ambulance were not there to look after her. They were there to put an end to her.
And how was you see, again, it's just the practicalities of making a car crash.
Okay, Mercedes.
Yeah.
Mercedes car. We had recently an incident over in the United States with an investigative journalist who was working for Rolling Stone magazine called Michael Hastings.
Yeah.
Now, he was looking into the deputy director of the CIA. We've now only just last week heard about this, that's what his story was on, and it's going to be published apparently because he'd written most of it in Rolling Stone over the next few weeks. And so he died in a very, very mysterious car crash, also in a Mercedes.
Yeah.
Now, the Mercedes was filmed by, I'm not sure if it was the LA police or the police in the States, doing something like 70, 80 miles an hour in an urban area.
Yeah.
Screaming straight across some traffic lights. If you, as some clever bright spark has done in the States, what they've done is they've actually slowed down the footage and shown that he had his foot on the brakes. So he's got his foot on the brakes, and yet his car is doing 70 miles an hour.
Hang on, how would they have a camera on the brake pedal? How would you...
No. It's a police camera filming the car as it goes past.
Yeah.
Right? And you can see someone has actually taken a freeze frame from it that his brake light is on.
Oh, brake light, okay. Yeah.
So why is he doing 70 miles an hour when the brake light's on?
Well, maybe he's just slowing down
you've heard
slightly.
of something called unintended acceleration.
Yeah, it does happen. Yeah,
Toyotas have had this.
Yep.
A lot of publicity for the Toyotas that have had it. The fact of the matter is, when you press the accelerator, it's not actually connected to your carburettor or whatever is actually in the engine making it go. They have an electronic switch. Now, these switches can be hacked. This is the problem.
Yeah. No, I accept that. Right, but even so, right. So I'm going to hack Diana's Mercedes so that the accelerator sticks. There's still so many possible outcomes of that. It's by no means guaranteed to kill her, is it?
No, not necessarily. But I'll tell you what might do, and that is if you've got, and this is one of the theories I've read, is an explosive bolt in the car, so that as the car is going at a very high speed, what it does is it fires off in some part of the steering, and what happens is that the wheels then turn sharply to one side or to the other side. The driver's got actually no control over that whatsoever. The other thing is, it's quite obvious now that there was a very bright flash that came from this white Fiat Uno in the tunnel. No CCTV, bizarrely, none of the CCTV was working, as it never seems to be in these circumstances, but a lot of eyewitnesses have said they saw this bright flash. That is also designed to disorientate the driver. So you can actually cause a crash in this fashion if you particularly wanted to, if you were particularly malicious.
But you see, if your theory is correct, right, that there's the explosive bolt and the stuck accelerator, potentially, why do you need the Fiat Uno? That's to help
disorientate the driver. But he might be able to control the crash if, potentially, if he's not disorientated.
The problem is you still have so many unknowns, so many different possible outcomes. And if you're
one of those possible outcomes is that Diana doesn't die.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you've got the catch-all ambulance there, the dodgy ambulance with these murderers inside the ambulance that pick her up and then take her off to hospital in that fashion. Now, I mean, this is another scenario that hasn't really properly been looked at, but John does in this book, The Paris-London Connection, and he also shows that there was this organisation as part of the royal family called the Way Ahead Group that for the previous 3 years had been looking at, after the divorce, had been looking at how do we manage Diana. And this Way Ahead Group also included many of the senior staff of the royal families. And just before the death of Diana, for no apparent reason, the meeting time of this Way Ahead Group was shifted forward. Very suspicious that they should do that just before the death. The other thing is that another reason people said it was done at that time was because the two boys, William and Harry, had just had a fantastic holiday with the Al Fayyads.
Right.
And they'd come back from that gushing about it, said we had a brilliant time, a fantastic time. Now, the idea that the heir to the throne is going to have a Muslim stepfather was also potentially seen as a very dodgy idea, especially in the current climate, and maybe that was played a part in it too, because obviously Al Fayyad, Dodi Al Fayyad, would have been their stepfather.
Yeah, but I mean, you're still focusing on the motivation, aren't you?
I think you've got to look at it all.
Well, yeah,
what don't you like then?
Well, no, I'm still struggling. I still think it's too the murder mechanism, if there is one, which I doubt.
It's called MI6.
No.
That's what they do.
No, the specifics of it.
They are under the control
Tony,
of the Crown.
The specifics of the murder mechanism, right? You know, stuck accelerator, explosive bolt. I think it's just not reliable enough.
It's not that the accelerator is stuck, right? With these
practically it is, yeah.
It's because so many of these cars, particularly the Mercs. Have you ever seen the Mercedes? Are actually the top of the range in these remote control cars. They've got cars now who can skid with no driver in, drive around and skid, and then stop the skid right in between two bollards. I mean, they have all this kind of remote control driving thing down to a T. They can control cars from afar if they want to.
Well, yes, they can possibly, conceivably, but I still, I don't know.
I tell you, Audi had a big problem with this unintended acceleration as well, although it hardly hit the headlines.
But
so the idea that you as a driver are in control of the car as the technology moves on is becoming less and less the case. The same as aircraft.
But the method of murder, which you allege, which is you make the accelerator stick and you make the steering turn to the left. It has so many possible outcomes. It's not rigidly defined and guaranteed to work enough that if you're planning an assassination, you've got to plan it.
Okay, you've got to make sure that car's going fast. Okay.
No. You've got to make sure
it was being chased, but not by paparazzi. But what the inquest said, and very few people realise that the inquest actually was an unlawful killing. That was the verdict at the inquest, not an accident. Yeah. But the people who were following the car were not paparazzi. They were 4 guys on high-powered motorcycles who, as soon as the accident happened, disappeared.
Right. So what was their job?
Their job was to harass the car to make it go fast. That's what I believe.
Well,
and
maybe.
Also potentially to stop it going in particular directions, to send it into the direction that they wanted it to go.
So why do you need to harass the car to make it go fast if you're going to interfere with the accelerator and make it stick?
Well, the idea is called belt and braces, mate.
Yeah.
You have several different ways just to make sure you get yourself an accident and you get your princess into your ambulance. That was the fallback. If she wasn't seriously and fatally injured in the accident, that the ambulance was there to take her.
Yeah, still don't believe it. This is Peter Gabriel.